This one. All right, so welcome everyone. My name's Chloe, and we're really excited to be kicking off the Living Norway Open Science Lab today. I'm a researcher at the Norwegian Institute for Nature Research, and I'm a part of the Living Norway Ecological Data Network. The network supports building capacity and tools for a more open and more reproducible science. And this Open Science Lab initiative is funded by the Research Council of Norway. First, I have a few practical things. So since we are people from all over the place, not everybody can make it to the webinar. So we'll be recording this webinar so that everybody can watch it afterwards if they want to. We'll only be recording the official part. That means the presentations that we have prepared. And we will not be recording the open discussion that we will have at the end of today so that everybody can speak up comfortably there. I would ask that everybody who is not currently talking just mute themselves. As for the camera, it's absolutely up to you if you want to have it on or off during the webinar. But I think if you're talking, it's nice to put it on, but nobody has to feel pressured to do that. So that was a bit about me and about Living Norway, but I want to start this off by talking first about who you are, or more specifically, who we are as the Living Norway Open Science Lab. So as of now, we have 113 registrations from 19 countries across the world. And this has taken off quite a bit more than we dared hope it would. So this is really great. As you can see, we have most people from Norway, followed by France and the US. But also many other countries that we're really thrilled to have with us, including Brazil, Cambodia, Colombia, Denmark, Finland, India, Malaysia, Nepal, New Zealand, Romania, UK, and so on. They're very diverse groups when it comes to career stages. We can see that for most of the people, they have a primary focus on research, and there we cover absolutely everyone from master students up to professors and researchers. But we also have people who are in different roles, for example, working for libraries or in data curation. We're very, very happy to see a lot of early career researchers, but also very glad to have with us some more senior people. Since this is about open science with a focus on ecology, it's little surprise that most of us have something to do with ecology. About half of the people that answered that are signed up also think they are modelers. And about a third have something to do with data curation, mobilization, and/or stewardship. So this is just as a quick intro for everyone to get an idea of who the others are in this room and in the Slack. I'll very quickly run through what we're gonna have for today's seminar. So we'll first have some lightning introductions to some different facets of open science. And for that, I have invited several people from the Living Norway network to give you a short teaser on some different activities and practices that are considered open science. We'll then have a quick look at the results from the survey we asked you to fill out, which was about mapping your previous experiences with and interests in different open science practices. That'll give us a bit of an idea of what you already know and what you do want to get out of being part of the Open Science Lab. I'll then talk a tiny little bit about organization of the Open Science Lab, specifically about the aims and visions, upcoming webinars, using Slack, and the sheer endless potential we have for running other types of activities. And finally, we're going to open the floor for your input, feedback, comments, questions. And as I said before, that last part will not be recorded. Right. The title of today's webinar is The Big Umbrella of Open Science. And the reason is that there is actually a lot of different things that fall under open science, and they just keep being more and more. And what we're going to do first is we're going to have a series of 5 short presentations presenting some of the aspects. First, Alan Nielsen, who is the project leader of the Living Norway network, will talk about the umbrella itself and the importance of open science. I'll then pass you to Dag Andersen, who works for GBIF, which is where a lot of our open ecological data ends up. Next, we got Matt Granger, who will talk about open code and tools and why they are absolutely essential for progressing science. Next, you come back to me and I will very briefly say something about workflow reproducibility and accessibility. And finally, Aud Halbritter will talk about open science in teaching. So both teaching open science and making teaching more open. So with that, I will hand the screen over to Alan now.
Thank you, Chloe. Then I will try to share my screen and hopefully that will even work. Yeah, it worked. Okay, perfect. Yeah, first of all, I would like to say that it's really fantastic that so many people have joined us here today and in the Open Science Lab. As Chloe mentioned, I'm Erlend Nilsen. I'm the project leader of the Living Norway network, whereas Chloe is in charge of this, the Open Science Lab. In my normal job, I work as a senior researcher here at Nina in central Norway, and I'm also a professor in ecology at Nord University, 2 hours drive north of Trondheim. I was asked by Chloe to say something about the greater umbrella of open science, and I was given 3 minutes to do so. So let's see if I can meet that challenge. I probably already spent 1 minute of my my precious time. But as you know, open science started as a response to an understanding that we, as a researchers and the research community, could do better in terms of meeting our responsibilities to the society at large. So in a way, it's a reform movement that aimed to improve the research enterprise. So what is open science? We will hear much more about that later today, but in its simplest form, open science is about opening up the research process. This includes opening up insights into procedures, methods, data, results, lab notes, etc. And we share these outputs in ways that enable reuse and redistribution of the material. So in this way, doing open science invite reproducible research and transparency. But open science is also the practice of science in such a way that we invite collaboration with other researchers and the society at large. So it's not just about opening up access and insight into what we are doing, but it's also opening up for broader collaboration within the research community and beyond. So the open science movement also typically focus on increased rigor, reproducibility, and accountability of the research we are doing. So in short, what we call open science today is what we hope will be just science in the future. Let's see. I will try to go to the next slide. Yeah, it worked. So why are we doing this? What are the benefits? Of course, different stakeholders will have different benefits from us and the rest of the research community doing open science. One benefit is that it's efficient. When we are reusing data, reusing code, reusing procedures, and so on, this can create economic benefits to the larger society, but also at the more micro scale in individual research programs. And it allows others to investigate your results, so it facilitates a more crowdsourced checking of the research process and the outputs. So open science is often associated with a focus on increased rigor and research integrity, making the results more trustworthy. And this will in general also increase the trust in science in the society. Ideally, it also makes the research outputs more accessible to the society and fellow researchers at large, and create a path for faster knowledge transfer. And it should, if we do this in an inclusive way, it should promote more equal access to take part in the research process and also the results from the research we are doing. But there are some remaining challenges, and that's why it's nice to have a group and a network like this to discuss how we can move this forward. I think that the research community and the society as such is just starting to adapt to this new era of open science. For instance, we often hear about how the article processing charges are creating unequal possibilities to communicate our results. And this is, of course, a particular problem when it comes to researchers in the global south. And of course, there is a lot to be said about the current publishing model, but we can leave that for later. There are also technical barriers to enter and to take full part in the open science movement. And this vary between career stages, institutions, and different parts of the world. So we have a responsibility to be inclusive and facilitate open science procedures for the whole community. There are also remaining challenges when it comes to how we value out from open science programs. And this is just something that has been starting to be discussed, I think. But we hope that the Open Science Lab will reduce some of the barriers that still exist, and that we will together help shape the future of our research community. And I would say most of all, open science is fun, it's collaborative, and it feels like the right thing to do. So with that, I will end my short presentation.
Thank you very much, Alan, for this quick overview over the big picture. And now we will hear from Doug from GBIF.
Yeah, I will give a brief overview of how GBIF is supporting open science. So it provides free and open access to biodiversity data, and it is an intergovernmental network and research infrastructure to provide this free and open access to this data on types of biodiversity life on Earth. This is organized as a volunteer collaboration with the Memorandum of Understanding, and it has participant nodes with the Secretariat in Copenhagen. And the Living Norway is a very important part of the national, at least the national implementation of GBIF in Norway, but also contributes at this global scale. There are now currently 39 voting countries and 24 associate countries which are on their way in to become voting. The network could benefit from some more member countries in Asia, as you see. But there is data publishers from many more countries than only the member countries. So we have a model where we also try to support well, open data coming in from other countries. This is more challenging, of course, without national funding and a national node. We are creeping up towards 2 billion data points, and number of data sets and institution is constantly increasing. There's quite a lot of records with photos and other multimedia evidence. And before I mention specifically the FAIR data, we can look at how the data is used. It's used for a wide set of purposes. Important from the beginning has been conservation through species modeling and so on. Food security is a growing use. Of course, the climate change assessments, and now also very relevant with the COVID and everything, the human health. We are trying to mobilize data on vectors and so on. This is leading to an increasing number of papers citing the use of the data. And if you want to help us to contribute to track this data use, you just cite the DOI. So when you download the data set from GBIF, you find a DOI that you are asked to cite when you publish, and then automatically we'll try and track this. But about FAIR, it's about much more than just putting your data on the internet. And this is what we try to help with and facilitate through standards and this flow of data. And this will give you a lot of opportunities, new ways of doing research that was not possible before, including, of course, good career opportunities for young researchers and well, funding for institution and so on. So that was very briefly what GBIF can offer on how do I there.
Thank you very much, Doug. That was GBIF in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we'll go over to Matt, who will talk a bit about code and tools.
We're still sharing, okay? Can you see
You're
that?
still sharing, but you're not full screen anymore. You're back.
Okay. Hi, I'm Matt Granger, also at NINA in Trondheim. My involvement with the Living Norway network as a whole is mainly to do with developing R packages and tools and code associated with that. So one of the facets that live under this big umbrella is open code and open tools. And I think it's probably one of the things that increasingly people are realizing now that not only data is important, but also the code that goes with that data analysis and any tools that are built for research. Research tools and open research tools are really important. So a lot of you might have used the R package, an R package to do some work on research, or a Python package, and so on. So open tools are really important, and having open code is an extra way of us understanding what research has been done, but also allows us to learn from and reproduce other people's research. One of the most important things is that you will make sure your code and any tools you produce are available and easily used by other people. So that's one of the biggest issues. Some recent research has shown that actually a lot of code that's submitted to journals in ecology isn't really reproducible, so people can't use it. And what we want to do is try and make sure that everyone can use that code. There's plenty of misconceptions or fears about sharing your code, or sharing similar to sharing your data. So if you have open source code, it's very easy for someone to get that from your GitHub account, for example, or another repository. If it's closed, then it's harder. And one of the fears is that someone will look at your code and say, "Oh, it's really messy. My code is really messy." So Barnes in 2010 and a few more recent papers have looked at this sort of good enough computing. So the idea is if your code is good enough to run, it's good enough to share. So there's no need to be able to make perfect code. None of us do, and it's nice, but very few people can actually do it the first time. Another fear is that people demand support. If you put code out there, then people will ask you to fix it if there's a bug fix with their own system. But it's important to remember that you don't actually have to do any of that. If you provide code, you don't actually have to provide technical support as well. It's nice if you can, but if you can't, it's better to have the code out there. And the final common misconception is it's too much work. It's too much hard work. And what Barnes says is that actually scientists are very perfectionist and we like to see something perfect, whereas actually you can get away with having this good enough code, and you can put that in supplementary information in your papers or on a repository of some sort, and as long as it runs and does what you expected it to do, then it's good enough. I would add that good enough is okay, but also add in some extra comments to what you're doing and do some tests as well. But we can talk about all those things, those tools that you can use. And it's important to remember that code and tools put onto the repository, as Dag said, don't actually make them open. You need some licenses or some way of letting people know how they can use the data and what they can use it for. So I think that's an important thing we need to remember, is that there's a whole host of licenses, lots and lots of different ones, but it's choosing the right one, so that can often be tricky. In the spirit of openness and open code, all my code is available on my GitHub site there for this presentation, and the images of the cartoon images that come from this Open Science Training Handbook, which is really cool, so have a look at that. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Matt. So now moving from data to code to the bigger picture here, we'll have a very brief one about the workflow. All right, so this is your typical scientific workflow, at least when we work in ecology. People go out and collect some data in the field. It gets stored in some sort of local data archive. We then extract the data from the archive. We usually need to do some formatting. We then do some analysis to get to our results, and finally we publish them. Already heard that just your local archive is not really the best because it's vulnerable. Things can go wrong. They are often quite messy, to be honest, even for the best of us. So it's much better if your data also lives in an accessible online database that additionally has some metadata actually allowing us to reuse it. And with accessible tools, it actually becomes much easier to put your data from your local archive to your online database, and also to get it out of there again, to feed it back into the regular research workflow. So in the past few years, Living Norway has worked a lot on this first part. Tools for putting the data online, writing metadata, and extracting it back out. But open science is starting to go further and further and extending into the rest of what we have here in the workflow. And we have to be aware that when we do research, we make a lot of decisions along the way. Some of those decisions are formalized as they are written down in our code, but a lot of them just kind of happen on the side. And unless all the decisions, code snippets, and routines are documented and organized, our work will not be reproducible. And that doesn't just mean that other people cannot rerun it. It also means that we ourselves will struggle to rerun it. It's something that gets in our way, for example, when we have to do revisions for a paper, or when we think about larger scale assessments, for example, of biodiversity or ecosystem change, large analyses that need to be rerun every year, or at least on regular intervals, to include new data and get updated insights. So if we do not have a functioning and well-documented workflow, every single time we get to that stage, it's going to be a huge pain for everybody involved. Well, aside from your own grievances, does that really matter? Because, you know, once we have the publication, that's it, right? But the thing is that in today's world, and especially for the research of the future, that's just not gonna cut it anymore. A lot of today's research is based on either integrated or even meta-analysis. In integrated analysis, you're using your own data combined with somebody else's data. And obviously that's a lot easier to do if that other data is in a usable format. Meta-analysis, on the other hand, takes it even a step further, where your own results are used together with the results from other studies to create knowledge at a higher level. So the awareness of the importance of documenting and making our whole workflows reproducible is really increasing, and tools and guidelines are starting to emerge all over the place. This is something that we see starting to happen now, but it's also something that some of us, at least, maybe will want to contribute to and make sure that we as a scientific community get to that goal a little bit faster. And getting there a little bit faster means not only that we have to change our own behaviors, but we also need to do something about the coming generation. And that's what Aud will say something about now.
Yeah, I think it's working now. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk about teaching, because I think teaching is probably not what you first think about when we talk about open science. But as you have seen, open science is such a big field, and you need to know and learn a lot about it to be able to also do open and reproducible science. I'm a researcher at the University of Bergen, where we also have a center of excellence in biological education. And it's really hard to not think about science not think about teaching, sorry, here in Bergen. So I guess that's why I ended up talking to you about teaching today. But first I want to start with traditional teaching, which looked something like this, which was very much teacher focused, and the teacher decides what is important and what you have to learn. But of course, nowadays, teaching and learning has changed a lot and is more team-based and active. And at universities, we also try to make education more research-based, which means that we embed education in a real research context. So while doing real research, the students are learning. And it's also learning by doing, which means they learn specific skills that a researcher needs. And these skills look something like this. So we often teach how to think like a scientist, how to use tools like a scientist, or communicate like a scientist. And that includes, for example, formulate a question or a hypothesis, to use scientific equipment, or to make a figure that communicates results, to just mention a few of those. But now with open science, this kind of opens up a whole new set of skills that we have to teach. And I just want to give you an example how we in our group solve that problem. So we have a field course that we do where we teach the students how to what functional traits are and how to measure them. And we try to incorporate open science skills into that course. So we don't have a separate course where we teach about open science, but we incorporate it in existing courses. And this is a comic that one of the students that took that course made after the course, which was very cute. And basically it tells the story like of her expectations and then all the things that she learned during the course. So something about theory, some new ecological skills like how to measure traits and different sets of traits, about workflows, so how to process data, how to analyze them, and so on. And along at each of these steps, we try to include some elements of open science. So you can see the purple text in these figures. So we also talk about reproducibility, data documentation, standardized data collection, reproducible workflows, and so on. And the idea is that after the course, like you can see in this panel here at the bottom in the middle, the students are supposed to go home with a lot of different boxes that contain theory and new skills and so on. But then also this purple box that contains these like new skills about open or fair science. And this is just one example, but we also try to incorporate these open science skills in like throughout the biological education, but also in supervision. And I don't have time to like give you a lot of examples, but for example, we have this Biostats webpage, which is a resource where that is openly available, where we provide a lot of tools and information about best practice in many different areas. So I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Aud. So this was your big umbrella of open science in 3 to 5 minutes each. And the way to think about what you just heard is more like a TV commercial or a teaser trailer, because the idea with the Open Science Lab is that we can use our network and organize webinars and other activities that go into more details for all of these aspects and more. So before this webinar, when we started to realize that a lot of people are signing up, we decided to make you all take a survey to kind of get a bit of a better idea of where you are standing, both in terms of previous experience you've had with different aspects of open science, things you would like to learn more about, and what you're hoping to get out of being part of this Open Science Lab. So we got 49 people responding to the survey, which is great, and which is actually the same number as people that are currently in this call. So coincidence. And these are the results in short. What we can see is that what people have most experience with is publishing open access. And that goes for manuscript, data, and code, and also using open access data. That does make a lot of sense, given that all of these things are often part of getting scientific papers published these days. For our Open Science Lab, it was particularly interesting also to look at what you would like to learn more about. and even more so the things you would like to learn more about. Excuse me. The things you would like to learn more about but don't know much about yet. So here we first have a lot of interest in open data standards and writing metadata. Some of the people on our team were very, very happy to see this, and also publishing open code. But we also have substantially more interest than experience for things like pre-registration, replication studies, general guidelines, teaching, and reproducible workflows, which are kind of representing the newer territory in the open science landscape. But there's a lot we can talk about. So this last question was what you're hoping to get out of it. And most people are here for learning and guidance, but we also have some people that would like to share both experiences and tools. And that's a really good mix to start off with. So I'll very quickly outline what our aims and visions are with this initiative. So the idea is that this open science lab is going to be a network, and that there will be something for everyone here, at least for everyone with an interest in open science practices. First off, it should provide opportunities to build general competence, but also to learn skills and tools in a hands-on manner. We hope that the community is going to be in the center here. And learning new skills can be quite hard when you have to do it all by yourself. With open science in particular, it's not rare that the people that we usually learn things from, like our supervisors, may not know that much more about this than we ourselves do. So the Open Science Lab should be a place where everybody can get help and find people that know about what you are hoping to do. We can also share tips and tricks and just learn together in a more efficient way than we could if we were all by ourselves. So there should be plenty of opportunities to get hands-on, because the Open Science Lab should also be a meeting place for tool developers and their user base. So if you're a potential user of a tool, you can get the pro tips and learn from the creators how to use the tools. And by doing that, you can also contribute to make tools better. If you're a tool developer, on the other hand, you get access to the best bunch of guinea pigs that there are out there. Basically, you'll be in the middle of the crowd that may want to try out your tools and provide constructive feedback to make them better. Finally, it's also an opportunity to just spread knowledge about open science practices more broadly. Like I said in our initial mail, so far, Living Norway has worked a lot on developing tools and concepts, mostly in Norway, but we want to go larger. Like, we want to make a difference at a bigger scale. And I think that through this Open Science Lab, we can all contribute to making a positive change in ecological research. And that, at least for me, is a change away from gatekeeping and egoism towards more collaborative, fair, transparent, and accessible science. So for those of you that have been to the webpage, you may already have seen that there are 2 more webinars lined out as plans. In April, we are going to run a webinar on publishing data with a focus on quite practical applications and the do's and don'ts. When do you publish your data? Where do you publish it? And how do you publish it? And also, what is up with metadata? In May, we'll talk about code, and we'll especially go into best practices for writing code that is accessible and reproducible. And for those who don't know yet, we will also cover what the GitHub hype is all about. So the important thing is that for now, these are just, there's not much more information than what is on this slide here. And the exact format of the webinars is not set in stone yet. And that's the way we want it to be, because we want these webinars to be as useful as possible for all of you. So we want to give you the chance to give some input and have some control over how we actually do them in practice. The way we are thinking about them, again, just suggestion is that the webinar can cover what the concept or the practice is about. It will be the current state of the art, what kind of tools are available, and tips and tricks on how to use them. And also some challenges and potential solutions, because quite a few things in open science are met with some resistance due to there being some sometimes real and sometimes mostly perceived challenges. We also hope that this is going to be much more interactive. Today it's a lot of me and others talking, but we hope to have discussion rounds around the different topics. We're also not going to run this as an internal knowledge dissemination only, but we would like to invite subject experts from outside. And that includes both people we already know, but also if you have come across someone or heard someone talk about a topic you are really interested in and you would like to hear more from them, then we can use the Open Science Lab to invite these people to come and talk for us. Like I said, it's all about making something together. So if you have opinions, feedbacks, inputs, suggestions about what we should do in the webinars, who we should invite, what kind of topic you would like to see covered, it would be great if you could provide some feedback with that. And the Slack channel, for example, is going to be a great place to just throw around ideas and see what others think. So speaking of Slack, everyone should have gotten a link to join our Slack channel. If you haven't, just let us know and we will rectify that. Slack is essentially a messaging and team working platform. And at the moment, it looks like on the slide, it has 4 main channels. We have the Open Science Lab channel, which is our main channel for any suggestions, discussions, comments, and so on. And that's also where we will put the links for each one of the webinars and keep all the questions and comments in one place. We have a frequently asked question where all the questions can go. We also have a welcome channel that some of you have already used to introduce yourselves to others. And we have a social channel for more random things not related directly to science. It's currently mostly full of dog pictures, but let's be honest, sometimes that's what we all need. Just a little bit more dog pictures to make it through the day. So at least give it a try and see how it treats you. And kind of as the last point for today, it's not all about webinars either. Living Norway Open Science Lab wants to and can support other activities as well. For example, small workshops, hackathons, skill showcases, outreach work, such as writing for our blog, for example, and many, many more things. And the many, many more here again is crucial, because that is again your input. What would you like to do? What would you like to learn about, and how? And so this is what the Science Lab is going to be. It's going to be a place where we make the things that you all want to happen. And we're really looking forward to having you on board for that. So before I open the floor, we're going to stop the recording now. And then I'm basically gonna open this up if anybody has